Hey, today we're going to be talking about the structure of a speech. This goes the same for every single speech that you'll do in this class. It's a basic structure that you can also apply when it comes to writing for those English papers. What you need to know is that every speech will have three basic components. That is the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. I like to call this the rule of three. You're going to hear that idea come up over and over throughout this presentation. Let's start with the introduction. Every speech must start with an effective introduction. This part of the speech draws the listener in and helps them understand what's going to follow. And the introduction also has three parts to it. It's part of the rule of three. Unfortunately, for a lot of beginning speakers, they have a weak introduction. When you have a weak introduction, your audience gets lost. This is one of the big differences between, say, a paper and a speech. So let's talk about the three parts of an introduction. The first part of an introduction is the attention getter. The job of the attention getter is to get the audience's attention and to make sure that they're interested in what's going to happen. You have to hook them and pull them in. We're going to be talking more about specific types of attention getters that you can use. The second part of the introduction is the thesis. The thesis is the main point of the speech. What are you trying to accomplish? It should clearly tell the audience your main goals, what your purpose is. If you have a weak thesis, your audience will get easily confused. And then the third part is called the preview. A preview is simply a peek into what will follow into the speech. It's kind of at bare minimum giving an idea of what kind of points are you going to be making. You have to be careful. You don't want to give away the speech and everything, but you want to make sure you have it. Alright, so let's talk about types of attention getters, since that's a very important component that's often overlooked. There are four basic types I like to talk about. The first type is that of the rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is simply a question asked and then answered before the audience can react. Never ask a survey or ask a question or survey the audience as a beginning speaker. It just goes wrong. An example of a rhetorical question is, how many people here have ever owned a dog? Well, if you're like the millions of people around the world, you have. Now, the key difference is, it's a slight pause, but not enough for people to start wondering, should I raise my hand? The next one is called a shocking statement or statistic. This is a statement that can be either funny or very serious that will get the audience to connect with what you're going to be talking about. Make sure it connects back to your topic sentence, what your purpose of the speech is. You must have that bridge. The third one is called an anecdote. An anecdote is simply a short story. The story can be real or fake, hypothetical. Now, when we talk about an anecdote, these are very effective, but one, if it's going to be a fake story, make sure the audience knows it. And two, it has to connect back to your purpose or your thesis. That's a key idea that goes all the way throughout. The final one that I'm going to talk about is the quotation. And this is simply a direct quotation or a direct restatement of somebody else's words. And then you connect that statement back to what your topic is. So you show how the two connect. Now you'll notice with all of those, you're going to hear that connect back to your thesis. But that is vital because it helps the audience figure out what's going on and where you're going with this. So a few other quick examples. The shocking statement or statistic, you might start off speech saying, did you know that 1 out of 4 women will be sexually abused by the time that they're 21? 1 out of 4 of the women here in this classroom. So you obviously use that to a speech, maybe persuasion speech about fighting sexual abuse or violence in the world. An anecdote where you could tell a story. You could tell the story about the time you and your friends were playing at Chuck E. Cheese on your 10th birthday, and you got stuck in the tubes. And a direct quotation are pretty straightforward. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the body of the speech. The body of the speech simply contains the bulk of the information. This usually doesn't create a lot of confusion, but that information does need to be organized, and we're going to spend some special time with that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what to do in the body of the speech, other than you're going to group your information into usually 2 to 4 main points. If it's under that, your speech is usually too short, or it's there you just mix up too much stuff. If it's over 4 main points, things get really confusing. Alright, so let's talk about the conclusion. The conclusion also has 3 main points. The rule of 3. The first part of the conclusion is the review. The review restates the main points of the body. It's just like the preview, except it comes at the end of the speech. Then the next part of the conclusion is where you restate the thesis. You want to remind the audience the purpose of your speech. Restate your goal. You should say this pretty much word for word as you said your thesis at the beginning. And last is the final thought. And this is where you're going to connect, leave your audience thinking, have it lasting, engaged in their brain by trying to connect it back to something that you talked about in the attention getter. So, for example, if you were doing a very serious speech about fighting domestic abuse and sexual abuse in the world, maybe you started that shocking statistic of 4 in 1 women will be sexually abused or harassed by the time that they're 21. You might finish your speech off with, so now that you've heard this speech and how we can begin to fight this, then maybe we can make sure that your girlfriend, your sister, your a niece or a cousin will not end up as one of those statistics. It just helps the audience connect everything back. And that's the purpose. Because while a speech structure has the same structure as writing, unfortunately, you can't read it again. So pay attention.